European Union is locking down its borders with all other nations in a bid to stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus. After more than a week stranded in the Caribbean, the British cruise ship MS Braemar, with 5 confirmed COVID-19 cases on board, this Tuesday entered Cuban territorial waters. A High Court judge this Tuesday granted an injunction blocking the national recount of votes in Guyana. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. A total of 819 COVID-19 cases and 7 deaths have been reported in Latin America, forcing nations to tighten restrictions to stem the spread of the disease. The de facto government of Bolivia announced on Tuesday that it will close borders to non-residents and suspend all international flights to combat the spread of the coronavirus. The measures will take effect over the next 3 days and remain in place until March 31st. The Honduran government ordered a 7-day curfew after confirming 2 new cases for a total of 8 in the country. Honduras suspended public and private sector activities, all public events, public transport and religious activities. Likewise, a curfew was imposed in Ecuador, among additional measures to contain the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Ecuador has so far reported 110 cases. Venezuela has adopted the Chinese model to counter the COVID-19 epidemic. This model is based on social isolation and border closures. The purpose of the quarantine is to delay the emergence of new cases to allow for their treatment by the country's present healthcare infrastructure. Meanwhile, in Brazil, authorities confirmed the first death from the novel coronavirus on Tuesday, as Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro declared a state of emergency over the pandemic, restricting public transport and restaurant services. Other measures included closing Rio's iconic Christ the Redeemer statue and the cable car to Sugarloaf Mountain, 2 of the city's most famous attractions. Brazil has now confirmed 234 COVID-19 cases, concentrated in Sao Paulo and Rio. Cuba confirmed 2 new cases of COVID-19 this Tuesday, bringing the total to 7. Dr. Francisco Duran, National Director of Epidemiology, confirmed the 2 new cases and noted that both patients were infected with the coronavirus abroad. He added that an official statement will soon be made available with all the details. Cuba received the MS Braemar cruise ship on Tuesday after British authorities requested help to disembark and transfer its passengers and crew to the UK. The ship is reported to be carrying 5 cases of the COVID-19 virus.
While there are people who are sick on the cruise ship and others who may be in the incubation period, our country has the necessary resources, means and know-how to conduct a successful operation and ensure that none of those patients arriving on the ship will transmit the disease to any of those with whom they will be in contact in Cuba. Our Ministry of Public Health has meticulously prepared itself with all human and material resources and technologies to undertake a quick and precise evacuation operation. We must resolve the situation on this cruise ship after other countries decided to deny it access. These people have to be transferred to their respective countries, and we are confident that with the preparations we have made, this critical situation facing those aboard the ship will be resolved.
Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arias reported on Tuesday that the government of President Nicolas Maduro had requested an emergency loan of $5 billion from the International Monetary Fund to fight the COVID-19 outbreak. These resources will be deployed to adequately address the health emergency caused by the novel coronavirus, given the economic impact of US sanctions on the country. In a letter to IMF Director Kristalina Georgieva, President Maduro noted that only under the spirit of solidarity, brotherhood and social discipline will we be able to overcome this situation and protect the lives and well-being of our peoples. During an interview with Telesur, Cuban Dr. Luis Herrera expressed that Venezuela acted timely to avoid further COVID-19 infections and confirmed that the country has effective sanitary measures and an organizational capacity to eradicate the novel coronavirus. Dr. Herrera, who created the interferon antiviral drug that has helped treat patients with COVID-19 in China, also discussed that experience.
In China, practically few weeks after the beginning of the break, people start to use interferon in a way to avoid complications of people being infected with the virus. Mm-hmm. This is a molecule that has some side effects, but not very critical. The main idea is just to avoid big complications. Mm-hmm. I mean, if people are having a normal situation with respect to interferon, young people having a good immuno response, mm-hmm. they perhaps don't need the interferon. But people being already old people or some people having some immuno problem, then they should have some kind of treatment in order to avoid complication. This is the main purpose of the use of interferon, because the main thing here is to decrease we can say the multiplication of the virus in the population, and not to permitting people being submitted to the possibility of being, we can say, in drastic situation.
Moving to the African continent, 400 cases of the novel coronavirus have been confirmed across the region, with a number of countries imposing a range of preventative and containment measures against the spread of the pandemic. According to the latest World Health Organization data on COVID-19 in Africa, the situation remains fluid as countries begin to confirm cases. In a little over a week, 21 new African countries have reported cases, bringing the total affected nations to 30. In West Africa, Liberia and Benin reported their first cases on Monday. Somalia, meanwhile, confirmed its first case of the novel coronavirus and announced a ban on international flights in and out of the country. Likewise, Rwanda has shut schools and churches for 2 weeks and banned concerts and large gatherings. Meanwhile, Ethiopia introduced its own raft of fresh restrictions on Monday, closing schools and suspending large public gatherings. There are also reports coming in of new cases in Ethiopia and also Nigeria. The European Union is locking down its borders with all other nations in a bid to stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus. German Chancellor Angela Merkel announced today that all external borders for countries within the bloc will close for 30 days for non-essential travel. People within the EU's 27 member nations can still travel between those countries, although there will be some restrictions, and Europeans stranded abroad will be repatriated. People returning to their home country might be asked to isolate themselves for 2 weeks, possibly away from their families. Medical staff, medicine and goods won't be restricted across external borders. The rules will come into force as soon as each national government prepares the necessary conditions. And meanwhile, in Spain, the fourth most affected country in the world, now has 11,178 COVID-19 cases and has seen 491 deaths. The number of people who have recovered from the virus has almost doubled, from 530 to 1,028, according to figures released by the Spanish Ministry of Health. The Spanish Prime Minister announced further measures to address the outbreak.
117 billion will be entirely public, and the rest will be complemented with the mobilization of private resources. I insist, this is the largest mobilization of economic resources in Spain's recent history, in our democracy, and in a short time, in a very short time. Firstly, I would like to announce that we will allocate 600 million euros to finance the basic benefits of the corresponding social services of the autonomous communities, with special attention to the health care of the elderly and dependent people, who are unfortunately vulnerable due to this pandemic. We are going to ensure that protection reaches the widest possible coverage, especially for the people, I insist, who are vulnerable.
Iran received the second supply of medical equipment from the United Arab Emirates, as well as from UNICEF and Uzbekistan, as the Islamic Republic fights to contain the COVID-19 outbreak, which has so far killed more than 800 people. On Twitter, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Sayed Abbas Mousavi praised the two countries and the UN agency for the recent deliveries of medical supplies. Iran has called on other countries to provide their assistance, given that US sanctions prevent the country from accessing all the supplies it needs to combat the virus. COVID-19 has killed more people in Iran than any other country except China and Italy. The country's health ministry confirmed some 14,000 cases, while more than 850 people have died. And we've got more stories coming up, including on the Democratic primaries in Florida, Arizona and Illinois. Don't go away. Elections of May 2nd was supposed to start on Monday, but High Court Judge Justice Franklin Holder this Tuesday granted an injunction, blocking the process from moving forward. The application was filed by Ulita Grace Moore, a candidate for the ruling coalition in the last government elections, and named the chairperson of the Guyana Elections Commission, Justice Claudette Singh, and Chief Elections Officer Keith Lowenfield as respondents. The judge has ordered a halt to the process agreed between incumbent President David Granger and opposition leader Barrett Jagdeo until the hearing and determination of this action. The hearing of the injunction has been fixed for this Friday. New evidence has come to light in Colombia, reinforcing the accusations of electoral fraud linked to President Ivan Duque. Audio recordings leaked to the press dating from 2018 confirmed a meeting held by the then candidate Ivan Duque with 15 mayors of the Department of Magdalena, chaired by parliamentarian Edward Rodriguez. The recordings also mentioned business links between the late Colombian drug trafficker Jose Guillermo Hernandez, alias Nene, and Adriana Castro, who was appointed Colombian ambassador to Russia by Duque. The revelation of these new audio recordings directly implicates Duque in illicit activities linked to former President and Senator Álvaro Uribe, as well as Hernandez. The US state of Ohio called off its Democratic primary less than 12 hours before polls were due to open in order to protect voters and poll workers from the novel coronavirus outbreak. Officials in Florida, Arizona and Illinois decided to continue with the vote, but by early Tuesday morning it was reported that fears surrounding the virus were preventing people from heading to the polls. Some Florida polling stations couldn't open as poll workers didn't arrive. Voting rights groups have advocated for upcoming elections to be postponed or for states holding them as scheduled to adopt more lenient vote-by-mail and absentee ballot rules so that people don't have to show up at a polling place and put their health at risk. Campaigning has shifted from rallies to online events, and candidate debates are being held without a live audience. COVID-19 has now killed more than 80 people in the United States. And earlier today, we spoke with Cuban analyst Carlos Azugaray about the ongoing Democratic primary elections in the US. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
That coronavirus is going to affect the election. We don't know exactly how or to what extent, but obviously this is huge and it can have a great impact. As your correspondent Jorge Gestoso was reporting, there is a low turnout. I would say that maybe that would benefit Sanders because this is pure speculation. Sanders supporters are mainly young people, so supposedly young people are less prone to be caught by coronavirus, whereas older people might be affected and they wouldn't vote. But I don't see how that could very well change. But I have said before that a U.S. election is like a big theatrical play played in 50 different theaters at the same time with a big finale at the conventions of the parties. Obviously, that's not going to happen this year because part of the whole thing is the performance in the rallies, in the victory celebrations. All that cannot happen. So we'll have a different kind of campaign, but nevertheless, I don't think the results, as they seem to be leading to a victory of Joe Biden over Bernie Sanders, I don't see that changing very much, but still, we have to see. We'll have to wait.
And we have more stories coming up after this final break, including on events in Palestine. Don't go away. Welcome back. The Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates submitted a document before the International Criminal Court on Monday that presents allegations regarding war crimes and crimes against humanity committed within Palestinian territory. The move responds to the request by the pre-trial chamber of the court issued in January of this year, calling on both the Palestinian state and victims of Israeli attacks to submit written observations on what is happening in the territory. The State of Palestine reaffirmed the sovereignty of its territory, including the West Bank, East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, recognised by the international community, for which it urged the ICC to end impunity and hold the perpetrators accountable for their crimes. In addition, a history of legal events was added to the observations in order to open the way for an official criminal investigation into the crimes perpetrated against the Palestinian people since the Israeli occupation began in 1967. The document includes statements from various international organisations, lawyers, professors and human rights defenders who reiterate that the court has jurisdiction to rule on the territory of the State of Palestine. The Swedish government plans to send up to 150 soldiers to Mali to support a French military initiative combining special force troops from different countries in a bid to eradicate jihadist extremists from the country. The French initiative, named Operation Takuba, aims to secure military special forces from several countries to accompany Malian troops into combat. According to a Swedish Foreign Ministry statement, the government has decided to put a bill to Parliament on Swedish participation in the joint unit. Mali, a large mainly desert West African nation, ended a jihadist occupation of key northern towns in 2013 with French help, but the extremists remain highly active and have moved further south. A French anti-insurgency operation in the conflict-torn Sahel region, known as Operation Barkhane, is being extended to make way for this European force. France has 4,500 troops deployed in 5 Sahel nations. Niger says its army has killed at least 50 Boko Haram extremists after an attack on a military post. The West African nation reported that the heavily armed Boko Haram fighters attacked the eastern Timor post overnight on Sunday. The government reported that the army used air and ground forces to repel the extremists, killing at least 50 and destroying a large number of vehicles. One Nigerian soldier was injured. Boko Haram is based in neighbouring Nigeria. Its decade-long insurgency has focused its actions within that country, but the extremists have also staged attacks in Niger and Cameroon. Malarian President Peter Mutharika has refused to agree to the electoral reforms bill passed by Parliament in February. The President claimed that the bill does not meet the tests of constitutionality and lawfulness and that it infringes on the principle of separation of powers among various branches of the government. Mutharika dissolved his cabinet last week and transferred all ministerial powers, functions and responsibilities to the presidency. A March 13th statement from the Chief Secretary to the government, Lloyd Muhara, confirmed the new arrangement, which comes in the run-up to the May 19th rerun of presidential elections that were annulled in February. Political analysts believe the dissolution of the cabinet is a move to incorporate the ruling Democratic Progressive Party's alliance partner, the United Democratic Front, to help secure a win for Mutharika. Namibian President Hage Geingob has announced that he is going to reduce the number of ministers from 26 to 19 in order to cut government expenditure and optimise operations. He's set to announce the new cabinet after being sworn in on March 21st.
I will in due course announce the appointment of the Vice President, Prime Minister, and Deputy Prime Minister. That will be very soon. After being sworn in on 21st March 2020, I will then announce appointment of cabinet ministers and deputy ministers.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.